What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 367. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how are you, sir?
I'm doing all right, Marshall.
We're finally home, man.
Yep. We are.
Too many weekends away. You and I were in Las Vegas for the weekend. Prior to that, we were in Denver, which is, I guess, kind of home for you, but you were still working it. And now we're getting back into the rhythm as we slide into the frigid holiday season. But never fear. Got a lot of limited resources to bring you, of course. And, down and near the stretch on a format, we've talked a lot about Kaladesh. And this is a good time for us to start revisiting some level ups. And we've got one of those for you this show. And we've also got, a Kaladesh Crack-A-Pack. And that's right. I'm going to try to stump you again, Luis. That was so fun last week. I'm going to run it back. I'm not giving you a choice on the matter either. And I've got two pretty spicy packs here. In fact, I can tell you, I'm going to give you a hint, Luis, even though I already told you what the packs are. The Magic logo is still blue on both of these. So we're talking old school. So, yeah, so we've got a whole lot lined up for you. Before we get into our main topic, I want to talk about our sponsor, channelfireball.com. We do hope that you'll check them out for all of your Magic needs. This is a trustworthy site. This is a website that's been around for a long time now, since 2009. Isn't that right, Luis? 2008? 2010? Yeah. Feels like 2009. And that's a heck of a run. I mean
I guess to 2009, I guess, is the most accurate. Though I think I always think of it as 2008, but I guess 2009 is the actual name.
I feel like you should know this.
Well, 2009 is when we launched, but
I see. But you were involved with the behind the scenes stuff before then, so it's a little different for you. But anyway, the place to go on the internet to get everything you need Magic related. If you need singles, if you need supplies, you're going to find them all at channelfireball.com, as well as, that's right, free content. You can go there. There's no sign up fee. There's no sign up at all. You can just go there, watch videos, read articles from some of the best players in the world, all helping you stay up to date and be the best Magic player that you can be. One-stop shop, channelfireball.com. Also, the Patreon. Thank you so much for those of you that have recently joined us. We really do appreciate it. And there's a lot to be gleaned from the Patreon. You get access to the Patreon feed. I put some tidbits in there every once in a while. Don't I, Luis? Also,
at some point that joke's going to get old.
All I got to do is bring up the picture, and it's still funny. You also, I'll also often, like if we have a guest on, I'll open up a thread for questions that, exclusive to patrons. Just so we can get some more personalized questions for our guests and that kind of thing. You also get to put questions for the question of the week, which we've got coming up in just a minute here. And you're also eligible for giveaways. So I've been on a giveaway rampage, and I'm showing no signs of stopping. I've got a bunch of cool stuff to give away here. In fact, I have some dual decks that I've had for a while. Some of them I think are actually got to be worth something. But anyway, I've got a bunch of those that I'm going to be giving away. And this one, as well as a package of sleeves and a sticker, is Heroes versus Monsters is one of the ones that I've got. And I'm going to give this one away to our patron, Lawrence Halsey. Lawrence, thank you so much. He's from Potsdam, New York. And Lawrence has been a loyal patron for quite a while, and I really appreciate it. And again, all you have to do is sign up on the Patreon, patreon.com/limited resources, and you're automatically entered. It doesn't matter what amount you are on for. You are going to have a chance to win one of these cool gifts. All right, that brings us...
is the hero, and which one of us is the monster, though?
Well, how about we wait till the end of the episode, and then we'll let them decide. I think we both know, though. Question of the week from our patrons. This one comes from Spencer, who, by the way, Spencer's on his own podcast called Constructed Criticism. They've been going for quite a while, too. You may want to check them out. Spencer says, hey, guys, my question is mostly for LSV, but I'm also interested in hearing your thoughts. Marshall, he said, I had a baby this week, and with my child being born, I obviously will be taking another PPTQ season off, and I have to wait and watch and just try to help out my friends. My question is, how do I stay sharp while I'm waiting for my break to end in Magic? He says, Luis, you're currently doing coverage, and both of us He says he believes both of us helped CFB prepare for the last Pro Tour, which is not true. I did not, but you did. And yeah, and he says, but did you ever worry that you won't have that same fire that you could if you were actually grinding? And he says, anyway, thanks for your time and special thanks to Marshall. You know what you did. Whoa, that's pretty ominous.
I read that in the notes and I'm like, well, that sounds creepy.
Yeah,
but I'm sure it's not.
But you have had a few breaks, right? Where, for example, you're on right now, you're taking some time off of the Pro Tour to do coverage in the booth. And, do you worry about it? Do you worry that your fire is going to go away or that you're just not going to be as sharp when you do decide to return to, professional play?
Well, I know that when I was testing for the last Pro Tour and just like Spencer here saying he's helping his friends for the PPTQ season, yeah, you're not going to be as invested. That's just fact. Like you can help them and you can be, play games against them and maybe offer advice or whatever. But when you're not actually the person invested in it, it's just not going to be the same. Mm-hmm. The question is, when you get back, how do you make sure that you're in a good spot?
Yeah, that's what he wants to know. How do you stay sharp? Do you just have to brute force it when you get back and just grind your way back up to sharpness, or is there a way you can kind of maintain in between?
For me, because a lot of the Magic I would play would be when I was streaming or making videos. That is not significantly different. I do spend less time preparing for tournaments themselves, and to be honest, I don't know how that's going to look when I get back. I don't have that answer for you. I know that if you've been playing Magic and kind of maintaining your skills, it's not that hard to get up to speed. Like, I know plenty of pros who don't play in between Pro Tours and then just jam for a couple weeks and they're back, in fighting form. So I wouldn't worry too much. A lot of what you've learned is just not going to vanish. There's a lot of fundamental skills that just stay there. Format to format, you do need to be pretty sharp if you want to be on your best game, but you're able to do that by a little bit of focus testing. So I think as long as you don't literally just be like, well, I'm not picking up a Magic card for 6 months. Like, yes, that could be more difficult, but that's not what I'm doing, and it doesn't sound like that's what Spencer's doing. It sounds like he's going to try to help his friends prepare still. Yeah,
he's helping his friends prepare and doing a Magic podcast. I think there's a lot to be said for the immersion. If you fully stepped away from the game for that stretch, then I can see that being a pretty big issue where you have to learn cards and get up to speed, and it could take you a few months to kind of get your sea legs under you. But I think that, participating in the non-tournament aspects of Magic, like making content, reading content, playing games, of Magic on your computer or whatever on Magic Online, or an occasional, maybe you're not grinding for the Pro Tour, but, you get out to an F&M or a playtest session with your friends or whatever, probably does a lot more than you think. And by the time you're ready to come back in, it's just a matter of kind of dusting off the sleeves and getting back in there. So I think you're going to be just fine. Spencer, thank you for the question as well. All right, we've got a Crack-A-Pack here. I tried to do a vintage cube Crack-A-Pack, but couldn't really figure out a good way to do it. So we're going to do Kaladesh. This comes from
Kaladesh, the cube of regular limited formats.
Yeah, Montana. Thank you, Montana, for this.
All the way from Montana?
No, it's not from... Well, I guess it is from Montana. Yeah, I guess you got me. All right. Let's see what we've got. Fragmentize.
Solid playable, but not one I'd first pick.
Would you say that it failed your inspection?
Is that what's next? Is it failed inspection?
It is.
I would also failed inspection. I think that's a fine sideboard card. I have boarded him numerous times, but not a card I would main deck.
This next card is a rough synonym for Fragmentize.
A rough synonym for Fragmentize?
Yes.
Is this Jeopardy?
Yes. I'm trying to get you warmed up for our test for the sign-off.
Right. I don't know.
It's Demolish.
Oh, there we go. What is Demolish?
Yeah, correct. Thriving Rats for 200.
I really do not like Thriving Rats. What is overrated?
Yeah.
Actually, at this point, I don't think Thriving Rats is overrated. I think most people just think they're not very good.
They're fine. You're way too down on them. That's a playable 2-drop, man. Don't hate on the rats. They're not that bad. Do you just not play them?
No, I will play them. I just won't take them in the first bunch of picks usually.
Okay, well, then I guess we are on the same page. Wily Bandar.
This is not a good pack so far.
This is one of the worst packs I've seen. All right, we're in business. Revoke Privileges.
Certainly the front runner. Revoke Privileges is just a fine removal spell. Nothing insane. I would much rather have Prophetic Prism.
All right, back on the junk train. Renegade Tactics. No.
No, we're not on that.
Talk about overrated. Self-Assembler.
I do like Self-Assembler.
I do not like Self-Assembler. I think
really?
It's not very good at all. Deeply medium is how I describe it.
I would not take it over Revoke Privileges, but I do like Self-Assembler.
You know what I don't like about Self-Assembler? You have to play more of them. Like 4 for 5 is like, it's not great. That's the problem. If it were great, I would like it a lot more. I find it deeply not great. Also, you run into those awful scenarios where you draw both of them and you're just like, how did I come to this point in life where I've got 2 self-assemblers in my hand? Pure misery. Yeah,
I will admit I've drawn double self-assembler way too much, so maybe the card is bad, but I do think self-assembler is a fine card. I guess it's better than what you think, but probably worse than what I'm thinking.
Right. The truth lies in between as usual. All right, tidy conclusion. Now here's a real discussion. Yeah. Tidy conclusion versus revoke privileges.
I'm actually going to take tidy conclusion here. I like drafting black a lot, and I like tidy conclusion more than revoke privileges.
Whirler Virtuoso.
Well, Whirler Virtuoso is one of the better uncommons in the set. I think the card is fantastic, and
yes,
it's actually the subject of a lot of discussion when you posted that pick on Twitter last week.
That really crazy pack one pick one.
Right, and part of the reason that Whirler Virtuoso I think was selected by so many people is that it actually is fairly flexible because you can splash it in a couple different kinds of decks. And as is, I don't think it's as constricting as a gold card might normally be. So I'm in for Whirler Virtuoso. It's going to be hard to get me off that.
What about Ether Hub? That's not the one.
Nope.
Armorcraft Judge is pretty good, but
not as good as Armorcraft Judge, but not as much as Whirler Virtuoso.
Holy crap.
All right.
Well, actually, I wasn't looking at the rare. I may be able to get you off the Whirler Virtuoso, though. So Aetherflux Reservoirs are rare.
Okay, well, I'm not taking that, even though I do like that card. I've 50'd people before. I'm going to go ahead and still take Whirler Virtuoso here. Is there a masterpiece?
There is.
That's what I thought. See?
We have a masterpiece. Yes. We've got a Chrome Mox. Get the sleeve.
Well, if I'm keeping what I draft, clearly I'm taking Chrome Mox. But if I'm drafting to win the draft, I'm taking Whirler Virtuoso.
So this just in, Whirler Virtuoso sucks, according to Luis Scott-Vargas. He's taking a mediocre playable Chrome Mox. Here's the good news. I'm also taking the Chrome Mox, although... Wait a minute. So this does beg an interesting question because Chrome, I'm going to read it. I'm sure a good percentage of our audience isn't exactly sure how Chrome Mox works. It's a 0 mana artifact with imprint. When it enters a battlefield, you may exile a non-artifact, non-land card from your hand, and it taps to add 1 mana of any card, of any of the exile card's colors to your mana pool. So if you exile a blue and white card, you can tap for blue or white with it. If you were at the PT, where monetary concerns or, things that you want to put in your collection don't apply, is Chrome Mox actually like a powerful pick, or is it just Whirler Virtuoso and who cares about Chrome Mox?
Chrome Mox is not a playable card unless you have like a bunch of Gear Seeker Serpents, I guess, but you can't really spend an extra card because you have to imprint a card to make it make mana in order to just have potentially some acceleration. I don't think Chrome Mox is a card that you should put in your deck.
Yeah, I agree. So Whirler Virtuoso is our pick. But this is sweet because, as you may know, we give away all of these rares. So this one's going right in the old sleeve here, right alongside such all-stars as Ovia Pashiri, Deadlock Trap, Soramaru First to Dream, a Chromatic Sphere, and a Planar Portal. Oh, wait, there's more.
Wait, I gave you
thanks to Luis Scott-Vargas. We already gave that one away, buddy.
Oh, okay.
We've got a Mayor of Averbrook.
Oh, yeah, I did actually give you those cards.
Custom altered Evil Twin and an Essence of the Wild. So do you remember, you guys at home, when Luis said that when we had him do those cracker packs and then he was going to give me the cards? Well, he finally did while we were in Denver. And calling this an altar is probably
generous.
A stretch, but he did alter the Evil Twin with a Sharpie, giving one of the twins, well, I should say attempting to give one of the twins a goatee.
I mean, you watched me do it. You were literally on my couch at my house.
I was. Anyway, there's also a Chrome Mox in here now, and we will be giving that one away shortly as well. Again, to put yourself in the running for that, how cool is that? That thing is gorgeous too, man. I saw the Aetherflux Reservoir and it kind of peeked out. I'm like, whoa. Anyway.
Oh, the masterpieces look great. I do like that about it.
They look great. Anyway, if you want to have a chance to win that, all you have to do is be a patron. Doesn't matter. You can be a $1 patron, and your name will be on the list for a random selection to see who gets those. And then I've got all these other cool giveaways that I mentioned too, just a bunch of dual decks and stuff like that. So that's that. Let's move on to our main topic while I sit here and stare at this Chromox. This is a big one for, I think, mid-level players, right? A lot of players that are sort of still on the upswing and are still really picking up a lot of knowledge about how to play this great game that we all love. It's the most common in-game mistakes. Now, we had an episode a while ago, the top 10 traps, or did you make it 11? I can't remember. But the traps for limited. And those were more all-encompassing. In fact, many of those had to do with the draft portion of the deck. But there's a lot to cover in this area, right? And, we're talking about common mistakes that people make in game. And this is just one that if you consider yourself a more advanced player, you can use this episode to sort of double check yourself to make sure that you are keeping up on the little things, because these are the type of mistakes that you can address, fix, and then somehow live to repeat again. And if you are a little bit more of an up and coming player, then these are going to be ones that you're going to be able to kind of go through a checklist here and figure out, all right, which one of these am I susceptible to? Which one of these am I making and I'm not even aware of it? And which one of these are the ones that I know I need to fix? And you're going to use this show as a jumping off point to really buckle down and get them fixed. So where shall we start, Luis?
I think starting at the top that we've got here is pretty good, which is kind of a perspective shift. It's not attacking when you've turned the tide of the game into your favor.
Yeah, this is a huge, fundamental skill in Magic, specifically in Limited, as in Constructed, it's so more often laid out for you. Who's the beat down is the phrase that we use, to determine this, which is meaning, am I the one that if things progressed from this moment forward and were unchanged, would I win the game, or would my opponent win the game? And it's interesting when you see two Limited players playing against each other and they're both attacking past each other, because that signals that they both think that they can win the race, that they, and remember, given that Magic is a game of hidden information, both hidden from the players in the sense that they don't know what they're going to draw off their library, but also hidden from each other in that each player knows what's in their hand and they don't often know what the other player has in their hand. It gets really interesting when you see players, for example, both decide that they're going to race, because they're basically saying, well, I'm going to win this race. And then one says, well, I'm going to win this race. And then you get to find out who actually does. Though the more common scenario is one where you've got a player, and this is, by the way, if you ever find yourself falling for this particular mistake of not attacking when you've turned the tide of the game in your favor, this is a really good litmus test, I think, to figure out if you're good at figuring this out or how much you're paying attention to it, which is this one. You start out the game behind. Your opponent goes 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop. You maybe miss a land drop. Maybe you played a couple of cards in your deck that didn't really do a whole lot to affect the board, but could give you an advantage in the late game. And so you're not able to block right away. And your opponent's just curving out, and they're just threatening to straight up run you over before you really even get anything going. Then, you make it up to your 6th land or, a little bit down the line. And next thing you know, you've got a couple of 4/4 flyers in the air. You've got some ground blockers, and your opponent's aggro deck has kind of sputtered to a stop. But you're not a high life total. You're at 4 or 6 life or something like that. And you're scared. You still have that mentality of like, okay, if I can just do this, then I cannot die. But here's the interesting part. If you were to take a snapshot of this board state with the 2 big flyers and then, some ground blockers versus a bunch of smaller creatures, generally speaking, from your opponent, you would look at this and say, I should just attack here. I've got the boards, pretty well gummed up. I'm still at 6 life or 4 life. I'm not, going to die to one creature here. And my opponent is at 16 and I've got 2 4/4 flyers. I can just attack them down to 8. They don't have any blocks, and they have to kill me next turn if they don't, then the game ends. Or deal with one of my flyers or whatever. And that situation looks almost trivial when you just pop your head in. When it doesn't look trivial is when you were the one playing that game and you've been scrapping and fighting and thinking you were going to lose this whole entire game. And now all of a sudden you have actually turned the corner and stabilized. And the mistake that you see, Luis, at all levels of play is not knowing, is basically like waiting an extra turn, right? Or just chipping in with one of the flyers or saying, okay, I'll just wait one more turn just to make sure that the dust is settled. And then I'm going to start attacking. And I see that all the time in the booth and all over the place.
Yeah, basically, like I mentioned, it's because you've been in this game the whole time and you're under the impression that you're the defensive player, that you're getting beaten down. It has the effect of you feeling like you're on the back foot and you're defensive, even when, the example used is if you got Owen Turtenwald, or William Jensen to like pop in, look at your game state, what would they do? Because they don't have all that preconceived notion. You're kind of letting the beginning of the game weigh too heavily on you. And this example you have is pretty clear cut, but even other examples that are a little less clear, you'll see this effect on people where once they have themselves pegged as the defensive player, they don't look as much for opportunities to start attacking. Like sometimes, I've said it, many times, like sometimes I don't want to trade 3 damage for 1 damage because I'm the person who needs to get to the late game, but sometimes it's just worth it to trade damage, even if you're the one who's getting attacked earlier, because you've gotten to a board position where you actually are in a position to finish the game. You're in the position to get ahead.
Yeah, and there are incentives to doing this, by the way. Sometimes, especially if you get down to a relatively low life total, where there's a number of cards that could swing the game, a threaten effect, a burn spell, a haste creature, these type of things that can be dangerous, but you're convinced that your opponent doesn't have them at the moment. There is some merit to denying your opponent those extra draw steps. If you sit there for 3 or 4 turns, just playing it super safe and just like, okay, everything's going to be all right, as long as I don't, make a mistake or, by attacking here, your opponent gets extra draws at those game swinging cards, the bomb that they have in their deck, or like I said, some of those more swingy cards. And if you are able to close out the game before they get that, you effectively deny them draw steps, leaving a couple of cards on top of their library that may have swung them the game back in their favor. Now, the interesting part about this, of course, is that, well, when, right? And this isn't something that we can cover so cleanly without a bunch of examples. But the key here is that you're paying attention to that and that you're keeping your eye on it and that you're considering it as an option. Even if you don't attack, even if you look at it and you say, my opponent could just have so many easy things here that could just kill me. I'm just not going to attack. I think it's correct not to. That's fine. If that's your conclusion, that's fine. The key here is that you thought about it, because so many people just revert to that fear, that back heels feel that you get when somebody gets off to a really big start on you. And you should always be looking for when you've now stabilized and when you're in fact now likely ahead on board and can start capitalizing on that advantage. So
yeah, I guess just to sum this section up, it's that while you should use the way the game is played out to determine your next plan, make sure to be reevaluating, make sure to be checking your work and know that, like, even if you were on the defensive before, that is not going to hold true the entire game, especially games of limited just aren't like that. And at some point you are going to be the one who wants to take the initiative, and don't let what happened in the early game color your judgment too far as the game goes forward.
Yeah, that's the real key, is that's the mistake, right? That's the heart of the mistake, is that. Let's move on to our next one. The kinds of risks that are good to take and when. And this is a really interesting topic because, again, this is a quite a judgment call, depending on the board itself. But, you'll see a lot of mid-level players, they'll learn quickly that, recklessly playing your pump spells into open mana and cards can be a really quick way to just lose a game, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to attack with my creature. And then they're like, block, you're like, pump spell. And then they kill your creature in response. And you're like, oh no, I don't want to put myself in that position ever again. And that is a normal reaction to have to it. But the problem is that's actually wrong, because there are times when it's appropriate and correct to take on that level of risk, even if you'd normally consider it reckless. And sometimes it's just an EV evaluation. You look at it like this. If this works, then it's a huge swing in my favor. And if it doesn't work, it's not really that end of it. It's not a disaster for me. Those are scenarios where you probably do want to go ahead and take on that extra risk. Even if it is risky, if the upside's huge and the downside's low, you've mitigated that a lot, and you can take a 2-for-1 or whatever it is that's the downside for you. Another one that comes up all the time too, this is a position that I think good players actually find themselves in a lot, is where you're likely to die in either of two scenarios. So like, for an example, like an all-out attack into a full board and you've got nothing in hand, it's usually a recipe for disaster, right? Your opponent gets to block however they want. If they have any tricks or combat tricks or removal spells, they can really put a crimp on, your attack. But a bigger disaster is just sitting back and not attacking if your deck doesn't have the tools to compete in the late game. This is one of those scenarios where it's like you can scoop up your 5 or 6% by making what looks like a very reckless attack, but gives you that 5 to 6%, or you can sit back and take your 1 or 0% to win because your aggro deck just is never going to outperform, a slower deck in the late game or a control deck in the late game. And, so both of these are scenarios where it would not be the standard play to send in all your creatures into, a full board or, something like that, or to use a combat trick, on a creature that got blocked or whatever. But if you're paying enough attention, you realize that might actually be the lesser of two evils, in which case you should take on that risk.
Yeah. To sum this section up, because this one is a little more general, it's what we've gone back to a few times, which is that risk is not inherently bad. Risk is just it's a way of expressing that there is more danger than other paths, and maybe you're not always aware of exactly the levels, but I think people do inherently shy away from risk because it is something that has a bigger effect on the game, and you that's not really how you should be evaluating it. It's more like, what is going to give me my best chance to win the game, not could this play lose me the game, or is this play risky? So
yeah, and it's tough, right? Because again, if you make those plays and they don't work out, man, your brain really tends to remember that. And makes you think, I just never want to make that mistake again because it worked out so poorly for me.
Yeah, it's the negative reinforcement. It's the risk, or the fear of loss, is why people tend to not play into these things correctly. So
that's right.
And actually, this actually kind of leads into our next segment, which is playing around cards when you can't afford to. And this has slightly more examples, which is like, and you'll see this. You will end up in a position where you're getting attacked. You can make a profitable double block, but you don't want to because your opponent could have a pump spell or a removal spell. And the problem here is often players will end up in that situation even when they will lose to the pump spell or removal spell just because they're so far behind on board, or because they can't block every attacker. Like the classic is, you don't double block because they could have a +3/+3, but if they have a +3/+3, you're dead to their unblocked 1/1 flyer anyway.
Yes.
So it's not logically consistent to do that, but it's really easy to fall into this trap, and I see people do it all the time. And you want to make sure that you're looking not only at the individual scenario, which is my 3/3 and 2/2 are blocking their 4/4 if they have a combat trick that's bad for me, but also if they have a combat trick, what else can they do with it? Oh, they could kill me with it, or if they have a removal spell, I just can't win this game. Then you should play as if they don't have that.
And it's a weird thing, right? Because what you're effectively saying is, okay, well, if they have this, then I lose the game. And that's right. A hard thing, I think, for people to come to terms with, right? Because what you're really fighting for mentally is, how can I not lose this game? Right? And it's really tough to come to the conclusion that, well, no, if they do, you're going to lose this game, right? But it's also very freeing, because once you accept that and you say, okay, if they have it, then I lose the game, then the plays become much more simple and they become less scary. It's not a fear thing. It's just it's just a logic question. It's like an algorithm. You just go to the next option, and the next option says double block. So you do that, and then they show you the thing and you go, yeah, okay, I knew that if you had that, I was going to lose the game either way. So I made the best play I could, and you shake their hand and you move on to the next match.
And another subsection of this is, you will sometimes end up in a situation where you play around a pump spell earlier in the game, and then later in the game realize you just can't afford to, so you stop playing around it. That is not inconsistent. But what is inconsistent is playing around it and then stopping to play around it when nothing has changed. If you think they had it before and you're in roughly the same position, like you see people sometimes like they don't double block for fear of a pump spell, then the next turn they do when they don't have enough new information to really make that change. So it's kind of tricky, this dance of when you should or shouldn't play around cards. And I mean, I kind of went into it when we had Paulo on, where I just don't play around cards very often. But I think that it's important to know why you're playing around the cards. And every section we have funnels back into having a plan, but these are just the little building blocks that you can have to construct this plan.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason why we want to go through and point these out is, you're right. I mean, the solution is always going to be pay more attention, have a plan, know why you're doing the things you're doing. But the questions that preface that are important, because they show up in different forms for each player, where some people are stronger at certain aspects of the game and weaker at other aspects of the game. So that's, I think, why it's worth it to go through each of these, even though you're right. The end result is, did you pay attention? Did you have a reason? Was your play logical? Because these are they have a little trap element to them too sometimes. What about the next one?
So this is using removal on bad creatures, and this is, again, our attempt to distill a general situation, which is sometimes you have to use a kill spell on a 2-mana 2/1, even though that is not something you want to do. And that's why it's a hard thing to make yourself do that. Basically, removal is only as useful as what it actually gets you. It's not intrinsically bad to use Lightning Bolt on a 2/1 or to use, tidy conclusion on a 3/3. But clearly, you'd rather use it on their 6/6 flyer. So, you've got their tidy conclusion in hand. You really don't want to kill, their Kujar Seed Sculptor, their 2/3. That just seems, like a waste. But there's no real such thing as what removal needs to do or intrinsically has to do. It's how will that help you in this game? And sometimes if you're going to take too much damage from a creature, sometimes if your mana situation is such, you pass on turn 5 with tidy conclusion up and your hand is 6-drop, 7-drop, and 2 lands. If they play a 3/3 that turn, a lot of the time you're incentivized to kill that 3/3, because if you don't spend the mana, then you're not going to get that mana back.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that you end up in a situation where the future benefit of the removal is just not worth the price you have to pay for not using it.
Yeah, it's funny. The card that jumped to my mind as the best example for this of the gut feeling that you shouldn't really be paying too much attention to is Nimble Innovator.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, they play a Nimble Innovator and they draw their card. And let's say you have a couple of 3/2s that you'd like to attack with. You may be reluctant to use a good removal spell to kill a Nimble Innovator just because you're A, it's just a stupid 2/2. And B, they already drew a card off of it. So kind of inherently that you're giving them the 2-for-1 that they were hoping for. But the truth of the matter is, the better way to approach it is just to look at that Nimble Innovator, not by what it did before, but what it's doing now and what that matters for. Because, we talked about the sunk cost fallacy before, on a show a couple weeks ago. And this is sort of the inverse of that. This is what they've already gotten from their 2/2 Nimble Innovator isn't super relevant to your decision about whether you should kill it now. Right.
It's a sunk benefit fallacy.
Yeah, exactly.
They already drew this card. It doesn't matter. The 2/2, a 2/2 that cantrips, that draws them a card, is worth the same as a 2/2 that doesn't in play.
Yes.
They already drew them a card. You can't stop that.
Yeah.
So
it's funny.
You just have to use a kill spell on it.
You do. It's really funny though, because people are so reluctant to trade cards for those type of cards, whether they're removal spells or creatures. And also, Brian and I, we used to call it keyword crappy, which is a benefit, which meaning that the creature is crappy, therefore nobody wants to use a removal spell or trade a creature for it. And somehow that makes it slightly better because, again, people are reluctant to just suck it up and say, tidy conclusions, your Nimble Innovator, attack for 6, right? Because they just don't want to do that. And then the keyword crappy kind of protects it because they'll just be go. And then, next thing you know, your little Nimble Innovator is getting even more value. So make sure that you are evaluating the cards as they sit on the board and not so much based on what they did prior to that. That is less relevant once it comes time to deal with the board state.
Yeah, you have to look at the future value of cards, not really the past value of them. And it's sometimes hard because it is counterintuitive to use good removal spells on bad creatures. And sometimes you just have to.
And dear God, it does not feel good. I will I will sympathize. But another one that's interesting that has a similar psychological vein to this but is a different topic, is overprotecting or not using your bombs or your premium cards, right? They'll play out a bomb or, a really good card. Like it could even be an uncommon, like a Long Tusk Cub or something like that. That's like one of your best cards in your deck. And they just refuse to block with it. Like they're getting attacked by a bunch of 3/2s and they've got a Long Tusk Cub and they're like, well, I'm not going to trade that for your stupid 3/2 because I might, be able to hit you one day with it, even though that's not going to happen. You don't have the energy going. You didn't get to attack with it early enough, and they'll just protect it because it's one of their best cards. And this is even more so when it comes to true bombs, cards like Angel of Invention and cards like that, where it's like, okay, I've got this premium card that's having a huge effect and they just refuse to use it. And then they end up falling behind anyway and perhaps even dying without ever really utilizing the card. And, that's a funny thing too. For me, look, I'm not reckless with those cards. If they're going to give me a significant long-term advantage, then I'm less likely to, engage them in combat or whatever. But man, if the game is even remotely close, I'm blocking. My bomb is getting in there. It's blocking. I'm attacking with it. I'm sending it in. I didn't put it in my deck to have it, sit quietly in the corner while I say, oh, mythic rare. It's so pretty. I'm getting in. And I think that you should too, within reason. I just think that it comes down to not overdoing it, right? I see people do that all the time where they overprotect their super important creature. Whirler Virtuoso is another one. Pretty good blocker. Like sometimes you just need to block with your Whirler Virtuoso,
I'll block their Thriving Rats with Whirler Virtuoso all day.
Yeah. You got to do it. And a lot of people won't because they're like, well, this could be my engine down the line. But like, look at your hand. Do you have the engine online? Are you 2 cards away from making it work? Well, you can't really wait around. You gotta get some value out of these things. And like I said, Long Tusk Cub's another example of that. If it's never getting in the red zone and you don't have a steady supply of energy, it's a 2/2 for 2. And you got to suck it up and trade it off for some, Herald of the Fair or whatever. God forbid. What about playing out all your lands?
Okay, so this is a 2-parter. The first one is, one mistake people make is they play out all the lands in their hand. And this is the most common when there's a card like Mind Rot, discard 2 in the format. Because sometimes you'll have like 6 lands in play. There's nothing more expensive than 6 in your deck. And your hand is like land and a really good card that you haven't had a chance to use it, like a Tidy Conclusion. You draw another land. You actually have incentive to just keep those 2 lands in hand in case they Mind Rot you. You want to protect your Tidy Conclusion. So it is valuable to keep extra lands in your hand, and it also gives you, cards in hand, which sometimes can make your opponent think you have something going on. But it's a mistake to just play out all your lands without thinking of these things. The funny part is the alternative, the other side of that, is not playing out all your lands. It's actually also a mistake to not play out every single land you have. And this, I think, actually comes up more often because people's default seems to be to hold lands in hand to bluff with, when really that's not that useful. People are just going to play their cards. And the reason you want to play out all your lands, even when you have no cards in your hand, you draw land number 7 just playing it, is if you have card draw spells, you have Tezzeret's Ambition in your deck, you want to be in a position where if you draw 2 lands and an expensive card, you can just you've already played all your lands, so then you go play a land, play whatever card you drew off Tezzeret's Ambition. And I've definitely seen people, keep land 8 in hand, draw 2, draw a land, draw like a 6-drop, and they just don't have the land drop necessary to play their 6-drop, and they just waste 5 mana.
It's so miserable when that happens.
Oh, it's very, very bad.
It feels so bad. It's really punishing too.
It is. And you should make sure that if you have card draw spells in your deck, you should play out all your lands. So to recap these 2 segments, if you don't have a card draw and there's Mind Rot in the format or other discard effects, not playing out all your lands can be an advantage. If you do have card draw in the format, just play out all your lands. You'll lose more games to not playing out lands than you will to like giving up whatever bluffing potential you think you're giving up.
Yeah, that's right. Sticking on the topic of lands, don't play the wrong land. And this actually hasn't popped up in the last couple of sets, but it does sometimes, especially when you see uncommons that cost, for example, white, black, something like that. The reasoning here is when you look at your opening hand, sometimes you'll have a card in your deck that costs, like I said, white, some knight or something like that. And you've got a plains and you've got a forest in your hand, but you don't have that card, the double spell, the double colored spell. So you go forest go, and then you draw it. And you're like, oh, planes go, and you could have potentially gone planes instead and played the thing on turn 2. And this seems like a small mistake because you just get to play it on the next turn, but it can be really bad, especially if your deck is looking to curve out, which many limited decks are. And also it gets compounded. This mistake actually gets worse because of the fact that these cards are generally very good. This is one of the ways that game designers like you, Luis, can tweak a power level of a card is simply by making it harder to cast, therefore less likely to come down on turn 2 or turn 3 or whatever it happens to be. And when it does happen, I mean, the card's really good.
Yeah, so this section seems very obvious, don't play the wrong land. But what it really speaks to is just think about why you're doing the things you're doing. Because you should know why you're playing your plains on turn 1 instead of your forest. It is important to think about the cards you could draw in your deck and how you want to sequence your lands as a result. There are other things that go into it too. Sometimes if you lead on forest and your hand is like plains forest in hand, you can actually just play a second forest if you don't have any double white cards to kind of bluff that you're mana screwed. Like I've gone forest when I could have been playing swamps out of my hand. But because I knew I didn't have any double colored cards, I wanted to signal to my opponent that maybe I just drew all forest this game, even though I actually had other sources. It's very minor, but if it costs you nothing, you should do it.
Yeah, for sure. Other things that pop up are 2-drops that have double mana color, 3-drops that have it, 4s less so. Usually you can figure out the land situation there. Activated abilities. Occasionally you'll want to overload on one color if you plan on playing a spell that costs that color while leaving up an activated ability that also costs that color. Just keep that in mind too. And like Louise said, these are small. These aren't, the huge mistakes that you can make. But I tell you what, the one time that this does pop up, it can really cost you. You'll be looking at your lands in hand and looking at the things that you're trying to do on board, and you'll be like, gosh, I actually could have cast this and left this activated ability up, and now I don't get to just because I was loose, just got sloppy with it. So again, like Louise said, make sure you're thinking about it. Pay attention to the double mana colored 2-drops, 3-drops, and activated abilities in your deck to help keep in mind when you're playing your land so that you can play the right ones in the early stages.
Next one, this we went a little more in depth on in the removal level up we did, but a common mistake people do is they wait to use removal. They've got an instant speed removal spell. They're going to use it when their opponent attacks, and they just don't use it on their turn while their opponent is tapped out. And, you have a card like Blossoming Defense that just punishes you immensely for that, or Built to Last, something like that. So just don't be afraid to pull the trigger on your turn, and often that's just what you're going to want to do. It's just a very common way to kind of give yourself a little bit of a percentage, because a lot of people do this.
Yeah, and it's interesting to bring that up for Kaladesh, because this is one of the sets that really punishes that too. Acrobatic Maneuver is another one that can get you out of that, get you into a world of hurt if you decide to wait on your removal spell. So always be considering that. One thing that I like to do for this scenario as well, Luis, is really think about what the tangible upside is to waiting, right? We know that the default is to wait because it gives you the most information possible before you cast your spell. We also know what the downside is, that your opponent could have one of these spells that thwarts your removal spell that Luis described. But I think that a lot of people do it out of habit. But what you should really do is ask yourself, honestly, what is the upside to waiting? Is my opponent going to throw an aura on their bomb and I'm going to get a 2-for-1? No, that just never happens, right? That's just not how things play out. Are they going to, if they've got a 6/6 with flying and I don't have a blocker, are they going to use a pump spell on it? To get in a couple of extra damage? No.
Are they going to play a haste creature and attack you? Maybe, but there's just not that many of those anyway.
Right. There's just so few. And even if that is on your radar, you can go, all right, Spontaneous Artist. Is that better or worse than the creature that I'd like to just kill, on my turn? It's probably worse. Probably just kill it. So, you have to be realistic about what it is that you're hoping for when you pass the turn back with the removal spell up, because I'll tell you, there are upsides. There are. You've got a 2/4 and they've got a 2/3 and they attack you with it and you're like block and they're like pump spell and you're like kill it, and that's kind of game. There are scenarios where it's very advantageous. Also, another one that you could find yourself in is if your opponent has an equipment Or if it's a vehicle, you can't really do it then. You have to just wait and, maybe you hope that they crew the vehicle and try to attack you rather than just attacking you with their creatures, and you can actually kill the vehicle. So there are times when you need to, or you're incentivized to wait, but you should be able to tell me why. If my opponent's completely tapped out and they have a big flying bomb and you say go with your tidy conclusion ready, and I say, okay, time out, world. Why did you do that? And you say, well, I'm hoping that they play blah, 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 and blah, 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 and it makes sense, then okay, that's fine. But if you just go, I don't know, aren't you supposed to wait? That's not good enough. You have to just kill that creature. So you challenge yourself. Really ask yourself, if I am going to pass a turn here, what am I hoping for? What's my upside? And if you can't name any, you probably should have cast that spell on your turn.
Hey, you want to know what this whole sequence reminds me of?
What's that?
That you should have a plan while you're making game actions.
Yes. Again, the answer does come down to it, but again, drilling down into specifics is really important because having a plan is such a broad statement, right? It's like, yeah, of course I should have a plan, right? And here it's like, these are ways that you can actually implement the times of forcing yourself to have a plan on things rather than just playing on autopilot.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do in this episode in particular is just take the very short view of a lot of the different aspects of the game where you should have a plan, and here's kind of the things you should be thinking about, whether it's playing your lands, playing your removal spells, when you should be attacking, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think this is a useful list. We got a few more to cover here before
we do. One really bugs me, and it happens all the time. It's people make decisions before seeing additional cards, and this happened the most in Shadows over Innistrad because of clues. But you have Smuggler's Copter and Kaladesh or Prophetic Prism. Basically what happens is someone has 6 mana, they have a good 4 mana play, and they have a clue or a Prophetic Prism. And they're like, play my 4 mana play my Prophetic Prism, or play my 4 mana play, say go with 2 mana up to crack a clue. And it's like, you should just see the extra card before you make your decision. What if you do a better 4 mana play? What if you drew a great instant? What if you drew a combat trick that would let you attack, and then your opponent doesn't block, and then you play your 4 mana play afterwards? And it's minor, but these things all add up, and not getting to see your top card before making a decision is just losing value. And people do it all the time because it's so easy to think well, I have 6 mana, I have a good 2 mana cycling play, and I have a great 4 mana play that I'm just going to play. So I'm going to do that. But you shouldn't actually start with that if you know that you're going to be cracking the clue or playing the prism anyway. Yeah,
another scenario that's similar to this that pops up is figuring out there's information that can be gleaned based on the sequencing of the plays that you want to make. And an example that came up today, and which is similar to what you were saying, I'm going to sequence this where I'm going to draw my card first, see what I can do, and then make my play that I was going to make anyway, unless something better comes along. Well, there's also ways you can get small advantages. I was playing against my friend Adam today, and Adam's been playing for over a year now, and he's getting pretty good, but he's still figuring out some of the little stuff. And we were in a scenario where I had a Long Tusk Cub and 3 mana available, and I had passed the turn back, and I had missed land drops a few times, so I had a lot of cards in my hand. And he had a Smuggler's Copter, but also just a 2/2 creature on the ground, and my Cub was tapped. And what he did is he said, okay, I'm going to... So he thought that I had Appetite for the Unnatural in my hand because we had played multiple matches with these 2 decks, and he had actually just seen the deck, so he knew that was a card I had in my deck. And I, in fact, did have it on my hand. His read was great. And so instead of tapping his 2/2 to activate his Smuggler's Copter and attack me with it just to have it killed before he even got to loot and get in for no damage, he decided to take a little bit of a different line and just attack me with the 2/2. Now, of course, I can still just kill the Smuggler's Copter, but now he gets in for 2 damage this way. He gives up a damage and a loot by doing this. And I thought to myself, well, that's clever. And so he's like, okay, second main, revoke privileges on your Cub. Now, the interesting thing about this deck is that I had 2 copies of Blossoming Defense in my deck. And I decided that the Cub was the only thing that I had going on being stuck on mana, and that I needed it to protect it. And I did have a Blossoming Defense, so I used it there. But here's the interesting part. With only 3 lands available, if Adam would have said first main, revoke privileges on your Cub, and I say... Now he puts me in a really tough position because if I want to save the Cub, I have to tap one of my mana. And then he gets to hit me with the Smuggler's Copter, netting him an additional damage and a loot, which is a significant bump. But because he did it the other way, I only took the 2 damage rather than the 3 in the loot, and I was able to save my cup. And, this is just the tiniest thing when you're playing. You're just like, whatever, I'm going to, lock down this cub. Oh, he had the answer for it, no problem. I still got in for 2 damage. But this is, one of those things where if you can sequence that out just a little bit better, you can squeeze out that more value. And there's plenty of games of Limited. I'm sure we've all been in those close games where that's the difference, right? Like getting that 1 extra loot or that 1 extra damage is the difference maker in it. So make sure you're sequencing these things out. You can work with more information. In Luis's example, it was, well, what cards do I have in my hand that I can cast? In my example, it was, well, what mana does my opponent have available? And I'm going to figure that out first, and then I'm going to proceed after that. So, yeah, these are just the little things, but if you think about them, they really do add up to significant edges over time.
Another one is forgetting to use activated abilities end of turn or forgetting triggers on your upkeep, these sorts of things. And you see this actually a lot on people who play online then transition to live play because on Magic Online, it just reminds you all your triggers at the very least. And the general advice is practice being detail-oriented, but that kind of applies to a lot of these things. But it's not even really skill at Magic to remember to shoot your opponent with your ping or end of turn, or to remember to put a counter on your fretwork colony on your upkeep. And one way to kind of just make sure you remember that, because it's just a memorization thing, is put something on top of your library, put dice on top of your library, do whatever sort of visual cue you want in order to remember that. There's no shame in doing that, and it's just better than forgetting it. Forgetting it's a bad thing. However you remember it is fine.
Do you forget?
Not usually, no.
I almost never see you forget that stuff.
I'm pretty good at that sort of thing.
I mean, because I'll tell you what, you at home might be thinking, well, yeah, he's a professional Magic player. He's one of the best players.
Well.
But I'll tell you what, part of my job at the Pro Tour is to run the feature match area where I'm getting the players seated and telling the director, which interesting match we should change our cameras to when one of our matches ends. And that means I get to watch a lot of players play pretty close up. And even at the pro level, you'll see players miss triggers all the time. It is not uncommon at all to see a player miss a trigger like that. It's tough. Do you ever do the little put a dice or a pencil or whatever on top of your library thing?
I don't.
I've never seen you do that.
It's just not something I've gotten accustomed to doing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's not something I found that I have needed to do. But that just shows that there's not any one way to make sure you remember these things. And whatever it is that works for you is what you should do.
Yeah. And there's no shame in that, by the way.
No, like I said, trust me, you'll have players of the year putting dice on top of their library to remember their Ether Vial trigger on upkeep. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. It just so happens that would be disruptive to my game plan. Plus, I didn't bring dice anyway, so I don't have any to put on top.
Or a pen. All right, we got one more to cover here. And this one is a little bit more broad, but it is something I think that is worth addressing, which is the mistake of getting decision paralysis on a complicated board, which I think happens to all of us at some point. But I think there is something to be gleaned from it. And
this is hard to break down because what we're talking about is, let's say you have a board where each player has like 4 or 5 creatures. It just seems very complicated. It often is. And a lot of players have trouble evaluating what to do next and often kind of mentally check out. And there's a couple ways around that. First thing to remember is that the way the Magic rules are, these boards favor the defender. The defender is the one who gets to assign double blocks. The defender is the one who gets to make those decisions first, and they'll do it in a way that favors them. So kind of a default is you don't want to be the person attacking here, but you do have to decide whether you need to be the one attacking. And one of the reasons to do that is, first of all, on a board like this, you should already know this. If you have information about the opponent's deck, you already know what's in your deck. Who do you think has a better late game? Who has a Skyship in their deck? Who's got an Angel of Invention? And who's got a Whirler Virtuoso and a Decoction module? Like, knowing these things is important. You don't know what they have, but you know what you have. And most of the time, you should be able to tell whether you have a better late game than they do, especially once it gets to a stalled board. If they're playing a red-white vehicle deck, you can kind of assume that your Decoction module deck is going to have a better game if neither player does anything. So that's the first thing. If you're the person that does not have the better long game, you have to look at how you can not just sit there until the game it finishes in their favor.
Yeah, that game is slipping away from you one turn at a time.
Right. The second thing is figure out what their best blocks are. Like, line them up. Mentally is better, like, without you moving creatures around on the board. But if you have to move creatures on the board, that's fine too. And first, see how much they'll gain if you attack with, like, just your biggest creature, because that's the simplest. Like, a lot of boards, like, you'll have a 6/6 and their biggest creature's a 4/4. If you attack, you're trading for a 4/4 and a 2/2, let's say. Well, that's okay. That's not great, but it means maybe your 3/3s can get in next turn. So you kind of see where things go from there. And then it gets a little more complicated. You have to look like, well, what if I attack with my 6/6 and my 3/2/2s? They get to eat 2 of my 2/2s, but they take 8, and that drops them to 6. Okay, so maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe they double block the 6/6, but then they take a bunch of damage from my other creatures. And you kind of look through those permutations, and it does get to the point where it's hard to do that, and that's when you have to lean on maybe just attacking with your biggest creature, maybe waiting until you draw an evasive creature or whatever bomb you're going to have that ends the game. But just make sure you're kind of at least doing the top level calculations, and sometimes there's some low-hanging fruit there. The other thing is, the more you do these calculations, the less these boards will intimidate you. And you just need to kind of power through them. You need to kind of get used to calculating them, because eventually it's not going to be as difficult. You're going to kind of know without having to think as much. And Magic games get to the state, and the worst thing you can do is no attacks, no blocks, just kind of sit there and wait to lose to your opponent's bomb because you didn't want to figure out that, well, if I attacked my 5/5 and trade it off, then attacked my 4/4 and trade it off, all of a sudden the board favors me because I have 2 3/3s left against their 2 2/2s. So you have to really kind of go down the ladder in that way and, practice it, because that is an important skill to have.
Yeah. And I think the big mistake comes when your eyes glaze over and you're just like, dude, I don't know. I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do here. Don't let that happen. You don't have to work through the math every single turn. If nothing changes and it was bad for you before, it's probably going to stay that way. But you should be checking up on it. You should be aware of the fact that, hey, there may be an incentive to me to make a big attack, or to send in my creature and trade it off for 2 smaller creatures to clear up the board for then the, Riparian Tiger that I just drew or whatever. The key is to not fall for the trap of just glazing over and just being like, I don't know, I got nothing. That's the point where you're kind of giving up on the game and just hoping that things go well. And that's really never where you want to be. Going back to the base idea here of having a plan, that's going to involve you thinking about, well, what does this board state look like if I do this, or is it worth it for me to do that? And if you're just stopped with that thought process, it's not going to go well for you. So just keep in mind that, yes, it does get a little intimidating to have a complicated board, and it can be difficult to work through it, but keep your eye out for opportunities. There are sometimes chances for you to chip in some damage, or for you to make a big trade if the shields go down or something like that. And you shouldn't be afraid to do that if it's going to benefit you. Okay, good. Luis, that was a good one. Takeaways from this, right? Obviously, the solution to a lot of these questions is to have a plan. But what we really wanted to focus on for this episode were the specific scenarios in which you may be making mistakes, but you're not aware of, or that you can refresh, that you can say, you know what, I do kind of just check out once the board gets gummed up, or I often just play whatever the first land I see or whatever has the prettiest picture. And there's times when I'm not really considering that. And, it's interesting to note that any of these examples often are small mistakes. But when you add them all up, all of a sudden you've got good, tight, clean play versus kind of sloppy play. And, I think we know which side of the fence we want to lie on for that one. So just keep in mind as you work your way through, everybody makes these type of little mistakes, but if you can start to clean them up, you're going to see your win percentage bump up over time. And of course, that's what it's all about.
I also wanted to follow up here a little. If you have other common mistakes you find yourself making, or you think would be interesting to talk about, post them in the subreddit. That's reddit.com/r/LRcast. There's going to be a comment thread for this episode, or tweet them to Marshall and myself on Twitter, just because it's interesting to pick up. Basically, we want to combine the high level, make sure you have a plan, make sure you're thinking through all your options, with the very concrete, make sure not to forget to put a counter on your creature on upkeep. Don't use combat tricks on your opponent's turn when you can use them on your turn, because as always, I think the podcast is at its best when it's a mixture of high level theory, which gets you to the next level, and concrete examples that can help you tomorrow when you play your next game of Magic.
Lovely. Love it. Okay, that's going to do it for the show this week. If you guys want to find us on social media, I am Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com, including a link to the Patreon that we talked about earlier, and links to all of our other content, the YouTube channel for LR, the Facebook page, Luis's stream, my stream, all that kind of stuff, lrcast.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Channel Fireball.com, for supporting us. We really do appreciate the support that Channel Fireball gives the podcast, and it's a partnership that I am proud to be a part of, as they have similar goals to what we have. Anytime you go to their site, you're going to see so much of the same type of ideas that we have, as far as the content goes, which is helping you improve, full deck guides if you're into constructed, draft videos from awesome players on there, including Luis. You put up a bunch of videos on there. I put videos up too. You can watch me play the Vintage Cube coming up pretty soon here. I had a pretty nice little deck, and that one will be going up on there as well. And again, channelfireball.com for all your Magic needs. Please do check them out. That is going to do it for the show this week. Thanks for hanging out. We really do appreciate it. We know that there's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a lot of content pulling for your attention, and we're really happy that you decided to spend a little bit of time with Luis and I. So, till then, we'll see you next time. Are you ready, Luis?
I was born ready.
I don't think you're ready for this. All right. So we're doing Stump the Vargas. Do you, I had so much fun with this.
Fun last week. We just wanted to run it back. Also, this has hit us in the middle of a somewhat busy time, so we're not going to be doing this every week, but I also kind of want to just get a higher score every time. So
yeah, I'm curious to see what you can do. Now, do you want to start on, I don't know which one's easy mode. All right. You know what? I'm going to start you on one that I think is going to be easier for you. Now, this one comes actually from a listener, Benjamin Wilson. And Benjamin gave us, Luis, an Urza's Saga booster pack.
All right, I'm going to declare victory. I'm not going to get any wrong.
For this, because, and this is really insane, because
those things aren't cheap either.
These are not cheap at all. Let me see. I wrote something on here too as well.
Plus, the only reason I really like to do this is because it gives back to the listeners, because they're the ones who win the prizes from the packs we open.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get something sweet.
Also, I just like challenging myself with these things.
Although I guess we're being a little greedy at this point, as we've already opened a masterpiece on the show today.
Yeah, that's fine. Greed is good.
All right, greed is good. I'm with you. Now. Well, hold on. I'm noticing just right off the bat that these are in kind of a weird order.
That's fine.
Do you want me to just do them in the order of the pack, or
any order is fine? I'm confident in my Urza Saga skills.
Okay, I'm gonna put them in the order that they would be.
Before I get like 5 wrong.
Now, so what we like to do is set an over/under. This should have 15 cards in it because it's old school, no basic land. You think you can just ace this?
I think I can get all the Saga cards. Yeah.
Wow, you are cocky. All right. 15 it is. Setting the bar high.
Yep.
I wonder at home if people are rolling their eyes or if they're cheering for you.
No such claims when it comes to homelands, by the way.
Yes, that is our other pack, by the way. All right. Rune of Protection Green is our first card.
1 and a white enchantment. You can pay a white to prevent all damage to you from a green source, and that's cycling 2.
That's true. Now, I'm curious. What is your relation with Urza's Saga? Did you draft this set when it was out? What was were you playing on the PT?
I drafted it some. Definitely this is years before I played on the Pro Tour. I drafted it some and wasn't good at it. And then when it was on Magic Online, I drafted it a fair amount more.
That's it? All right. Good luck. Retromancer.
2 red. It's a 3/3 Viashino. And then whenever your opponent targets it with a spell, they take 3 damage.
You just had to get the creature type in there.
Well, I remember the picture now. It's like a Viashino with like a thing coming at it.
Yeah, you are correct, and everything you said was right. Slippery Frank Karsten.
This is a land that comes into play. Taps for a green. You can pay 2 colorless to cycle it.
Yeah, that is correct. All right, I got an easy one for you. Disenchant.
1 and a white instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment.
Can you give me the alpha wording on that one?
An artifact or enchantment must be discarded.
You are on fire tonight, buddy. Cloak of Mists.
1 and a blue enchant creature is unblockable.
Man, you are running it up. Argothian Swine. I think you called me this once.
3 and a green for a 3/3 trample.
Seems bad. For Phyrexian Ghoul.
2 and a black for a 2/2. You can sack a creature to give it +2/+2.
Okay, these feel easy to you. You're just snapping.
I told you. I know Saga.
But I just looked, and it says that these cards came out in 1998.
Well, that's true.
This doesn't make any sense. Curfew.
1 blue mana. It's an instant. Each player returns a creature to their hand.
That is correct. Goblin Matron.
2 and a red, 1/1. Enters the battlefield. Search your library for a goblin. Put it in your hand.
That is correct. Shockingly. Sandbar Merfolk. Ooh, this one's nice and
blue for a 1/1, and you can cycle it for 2
God
mana.
dang it. You snapped that off. Smoldering Crater.
That's the red coming to play type cycling too.
All right, you got it. Ooh, is this card good? Victimize.
It's not bad. 2 and a black sorcery. As additional cost, sack a creature. Return 2 target creatures from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped.
That's kind of sweet, actually.
Yeah, it shows up in cubes every now and then. It's pretty fun.
Also, you read the Oracle text. What you read was actually more accurate than what's on the card somehow. Veiled Apparition. God.
Okay, so...
it's all coming down to this.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the exact casting cost. I think this one is the...
Is this part of a cycle or something?
Yeah, so the veiled creatures, they're all enchantments, and when your opponent plays a spell, they turn into a creature.
Okay, so you just have to figure out which one.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. Veiled Apparition. Is this the blue? I think it's blue, and it becomes a star when they play a spell equal to the mana cost of that spell.
That is incorrect.
So it's the other one. Is it the 4/4 one? That 4/4 flyer?
No, it's 1 in a blue. Whenever one of your opponents successfully casts a spell, Veiled Apparition is an enchantment. It becomes a 3/3 creature with flying, and during your upkeep, pay 1 in a blue or sacrifice it. That counts as an illusion.
I got ahead of myself. All right, well, I missed that one.
All right, we got one, but you still have 2 more cards to go. Let's see if you can finish strong. Lingering Mirage.
1 in a blue. Enchanted land is an island. 2 colorless to cycle.
Man, did you just say 2 colorless to cycle for every card? Because every card has cycling.
Yeah, I guess in this set, all the cycling costs are 2 colors, and a lot of cards have cycling.
Yeah. Rumbling Crescendo is your rare.
Yeah, so this is the red one. It's 3 red.
Yes.
Enchantment.
Yes.
Every turn you put a counter on it, and you
yes.
pay a red. I think you pay a red and sack it. It does that much damage to each creature without flying in each player.
Red, sacrifice Rumbling Crescendo, destroy up to X target's lands, where X is a number of... Now, I'm going to let you save yourself on this if you can tell me what kind of counters it gets.
God, it's some really nonsense counter.
Yeah, it really is.
It's not harmony. It's
God, you're so close. Oh my God.
Oh God, it's I can't get it. What is it?
It's verse. It's a verse counter.
Yeah,
right. You were so close.
all right. I do Saga pretty well. I got a little ahead of myself, but I think I did
You did. Job. You got 13 correct, by the way, and only 2 wrong. So that is a good run. And then also, we're going to put this Rumbling Crescendo right next to this Chromox.
Oh yeah, get those verse counters in there.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm throwing you a curveball here. This is Homelands.
Yeah.
This comes from our friends Ted and James. Thank you.
Homeland is like the full 22 years old or something like that.
Yes. You were a small child when this came out. Also, we have to adjust our line. Do you know how many cards are in this pack?
Homelands, I believe, has 8 cards.
That is correct. There are 8 cards in this pack.
I still think I'm going to get like 2 of them off or something like that.
Okay, so
maybe 3. I don't know. That's tough.
So
I don't know what a fair line is.
The over under is, I'm going to say 5.
Okay.
I'm going to say 5. Ooh, you got an easy one. Memory Lapse.
Ooh, 1 in a blue instant. Counter target spell, put it on top of its owner's library.
That's correct. All right, now it gets rough. Samite Alchemist. This is the worst set ever for Magic, right?
Homeland is widely regarded as being the actual worst set. Fallen Empire is very bad as well, but
Yes.
Samite Alchemist, I mean, it's obviously some stupid white healer, but
it is exactly that.
I don't know anything past that.
I might give you credit, actually. It's 3 and a white. You can, and it's an O2. I'm not kidding. You can pay white, tap it to prevent up to 4 damage to target creature you control. Tap that creature. It does not untap. Right, yeah, it's terrible. Sure. All right. Folk of Anhava.
This is... Wait, is this one... Yeah, I think this one's green for a... Yes. Is this one green for a 1/1? Yes. And it has +0/+2 under some stupid circumstances. I think when it blocks, it gets +0/+2.
Oh, you're so close. I'm totally giving this to you. It's +2/+0.
Oh, +2/+0.
Oh, yeah. You anger the folk when they block.
Apparently. All right. All right.
By the way, it's just a bunch of hobbits dancing. That's what the artwork is. Anyway, I'm giving you that one.
Very green card.
Very green. Yeah. +2/+0 when it blocks. Dry spell?
1 and a black sorcery, deal 1 damage to each creature and player. I don't know.
Correct.
It's also it's like a fish on a desert.
Well, no, it's not a fish. It's actually a helmet on a skull in the desert. It does resemble a fish, but if you look close, you'll see that it's a little more morbid than that. Joven, who has a lot going on in this set. This is his ferrets.
These are Joven's ferrets.
Yes.
Yes. This is another stupid little green creature. I know that. It's
yes. I've never seen this card. What a stupid card.
Oh, God. Is this
Joven's ferrets? Summon ferrets.
I think this one also costs 1 green mana, but...
that is correct.
It's like... I don't know. It's a 1/1 that has some stupid ability. I don't remember anymore.
That is correct. And I'm giving you total credit for it. If declared as an attacker, Joven's Ferrets gets +0/+2 until end of turn.
Oh, so I got them mixed up.
Yes. At the end of combat, tap any creatures that blocked Joven's Ferrets. Those creatures do not untap. It's a 1/1. Why would they ever block it? I'm giving you credit for that one. All right. I don't know what this card does. But this could be one of the most heinous uses of a really cool Magic card name ever, potentially, though we'll find out after we know what it does. It's called Prophecy.
Oh,
that's a sweet name.
I think this one's 1 and a blue.
Nope. Sure isn't.
So this is a different card than what I was thinking then.
Yes.
Wow. Wait.
Bad.
I think it's like white for an instant. You like name the top card, and if it's the right card, you draw a card and you gain 2 life, something like that.
God, you are so close. So it's white for a sorcery. Reveal the top card of opponent's library to all players. If it's a land, gain 1 life. That opponent then shuffles his or her library, draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep.
All right.
That's what they decided to do with the card called Prophecy.
They spewed off some names there.
Yeah, they really did.
Name equity.
Winter Sky.
Oh, dear Lord.
Man, this artwork, it might be the worst artwork I've ever seen. Also, it's obviously a red card, because why wouldn't Winter Sky be a red card?
I have no clue what this card is.
Red sorcery, flip a coin. All good things start with flipping a coin. Target opponent calls heads or tails while the coin is in the air. If the flip ends up in your favor, Winter Sky deals 1 damage to each creature and player. Otherwise, each player draws a card. What in the world? Oh, I actually know this card. I didn't know what it did. Aaron the Relentless.
Oh yeah, this one's 3 red, 5/2 haste, and you can pay 3 red to regenerate it.
Yes, that is it. All right, you hit your over-under. You got 5 and then bricked off.
Generously got 5. I told you, Homelands is tough.
Oh my God, it's terrible. Is Aaron the Relentless our rare? It has to be, right? Did they even have rares during this time?
Yeah, it was like uncommon 1 or whatever.
Yeah, whatever that's the equivalent
called. Is.
All right, man, you did it.
So look, here's how bad Homelands was. They had a pro tour where one of the rules of the Pro Tour was you had to use 5 cards from every set, including Homelands. They wanted to make sure people put Homelands cards in their decks. And that's
just
how they did
to
it.
Force them to do it?
They just made a rule that you had to play 5 cards from Homelands.
Wow. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm putting Aaron the Relentless in the sleeve with our giveaway. And we're probably going to do that next week. And I'm putting Joven's Ferrets in there too. That's right. You're going to win the Joven's Ferrets from this scrappy pack of Homelands if you win that giveaway. Okay, good stuff, Luis. We will revisit this at a later time. You're not done yet.
Sounds good.